Now, if you're like me and you're cursed with the soul of an elderly person, you might still find yourself reading actual books. I know, right? Crazy. There might be some of you also like me seeking an education in English. I mean, I got an English minor, but like, you know, I dabble, okay? But I know a lot of you out there are watching movies. And if you do none of the above, I don't know what to tell you. Go do something, I guess. Do something with your life. Now, whether you've read it in books or watched movies, I'm willing to bet that you have come across the hero's journey archetype. We literally cannot escape it. There's so many examples of it, which we'll get into. Basically, the hero's journey is someone who defeats their... My god, my cat. My cat is tearing up everything. Basically, the hero's tale is about a, well, hero who defeats their enemy and somehow learns a valuable lesson along the way. If you're thinking about hundreds and thousands of stories that could apply to, that's because you are correct, because Hollywood sure loves this archetype. It's absolutely crazy. Now, in this video, we will also be talking about Plato's allegory of the cave. Then we're going to take Plato's cave and the hero's journey and talk about how that applies to 21 Pilots. I know that sounds crazy, but stay with us, okay? But this time, I am not doing it alone. You guys don't have to hear me yap all the way through. I've literally gotten comments about that. They say you talk too much. It's what YouTubers do for a living. Today I will have my friend TheBlondeClikkie also talk about this with you guys, which a big thank you to her for wanting to do this. I appreciate it. This is how 21 Pilots use literary devices and film to help their narrative. There will be spoilers for The Truman Show, Fight Club, and Donnie Darko. My cat's still messing up stuff, so if you haven't seen those films, maybe tread lightly. Now let's start with a good definition of what a hero's journey is. And as I'm explaining it, you'll probably see how this connects to 21 Pilots lore. Now the story always begins with our hero, and they have some sort of conflict going on, some sort of problem that they want to fix, whether that be an outside external problem or an internal problem. Maybe they're not happy with themselves. They're not the hero that they're supposed to be. But oftentimes at the end of the story, there's change in both of that. After they've dealt with this external conflict, you can see that they are now a changed person. They are now the fulfilled hero at the end of their story. The hero archetype also deals with some sort of mentor who helps them along the way. I think the best example of this is Yoda from Star Wars, which Star Wars, yes, is a hero's journey. I did a whole presentation about it, actually, for one of my classes. Getting to yap about Star Wars for a grade, that was pretty fun. So using this example, Luke Skywalker would be our hero. Yoda would obviously be the mentor that helps the hero along their journey. Alice! These cats are gonna be the death of me. Now, once the hero has their little buddy mentor, this is where the hero makes the transition to the known and to the unknown. This is where they will have to push their limits, okay? The whole trial and error. Possibly maybe even a really cool training montage. Obviously, they grow both in... What is going on? While our hero is going from the known to the unknown, there was a lot of changes that happen. Of course, our hero learns more knowledge, becomes stronger in their abilities. They also change up here. You know, they mature a little bit. They come into their power a little bit more. Now here's where we reach the death and rebirth. Our hero finally has to stand against our villain. Now this part is the inner cave if we're going through Plato's allegory of the cave, which we'll get into later. But once our hero enters the inner cave and defeats the villain, they become a different person. There's a revelation, and our hero finally changes. They are finally the person that they were supposed to be all along. They return home with a new perspective on life and absolutely being a better person. Now, here's the little thing with that, though. If our hero never changes, they are stuck in this cycle over and over again until they do. And we know somebody else who is stuck in a cycle. Clancy. TheBlondeClikkie also pointed out that Joseph Campbell, the person who came up with this archetype, coined the phrase "follow your bliss," which that was very observant of her. Much like the lyrics, "keep your bliss, there's nothing wrong with this." Which, if you're thinking about it from that perspective, Clancy, our hero, is not accepting the change. He's not giving into the cycle. Therefore, he's not following his bliss. You can keep your bliss. So he's stuck in the cycle because he can't accept that. Big brain there. Clancy can never escape Dima, but we have to think about what Dima represents. Dima and the bishops are not your typical villain. They can't necessarily be defeated and never come back again. This whole narrative represents mental health. Unfortunately, that's just how things are. No one is ever that good and happy ever in their life. It's just the process of being human. There will be ups, there will be downs. Dima will always exist in some way because we're humans who feel emotions. It may be a constant battle, but there is always hope. And the banditos actually represent that hope. They have escaped the cycle. At least, you know, for now.
Plato's allegory of the cave is a literary device popularized by many films, such as The Matrix or The Truman Show. Remember The Truman Show, it'll be important later. The allegory goes as follows. Several prisoners are imprisoned in a cave, and the guards use shadow puppets to show the prisoners factors of the real world, such as farming, trade, and politics. Eventually, one prisoner gets released into the real world and faces almost an existential crisis. The only world known to this prisoner was shadows, but now, after his release, his world is full of color and dimension. He goes back to the other prisoners to tell them of his discovery, but the prisoners dismiss him and diminish his discovery. In summary, Plato's allegory of the cave is a way to reveal an unknown truth or world to someone who was originally ignorant to it. The whole story of Trench and the DMA org entries wouldn't exist without the introduction of a new world or understanding. Clancy, after spending 9 years in Dima, slowly but surely discovered the truth about the city. His discoveries opened up a whole new world to him, showing him Trench, the Banditos, and the Torchbearer. Once Clancy left the metaphorical cave, he was able to understand the bigger picture. I told you to remember The Truman Show. This movie, which is one of my favorites, uses Plato's allegory of the cave perfectly, and it has some strangely related features to 21 Pilots' lore. In The Truman Show, Jim Carrey plays Truman, a man who has lived his entire life in a fake city built by a man named Christoph. Why? Because Christoph wanted to document an entire human being's life on camera. That's right, this fake city is actually a huge set in Hollywood. Much like The Truman Show, the Trench narrative centers around the idea of a protagonist stuck in a false city built by a godlike figure. For Truman, it's Christoph. For 21 Pilots, it's the bishops. Truman's entire life is turned upside down when evidence starts to pour in that his life is false. Again, much like Truman, Clancy starts to realize Dima isn't the best place. In one of the most infamous scenes of the movie, we see Truman about to escape his only known false reality. Christoph tries to persuade him to stay, but Truman says his famous phrase,
"In case I don't see ya. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night." Yeah.
After this, Truman leaves his false reality for the real world. For Clancy, his act of rebellion is writing music against the bishops. Interesting parallels, right? There's another very strange coincidence dating back to 2017. Back in 2017, Tyler tweeted that he loved Jim Carrey and claimed that he helped raise him. Strangely enough, all the photos he used were from The Truman Show. Neat coincidence, huh? Back to Groovy Ghost Notes.
There are 2 more movies that could hold some sort of influence over the narrative in 21 Pilots, and that is Fight Club and Donnie Darko. As a clicky, you may have heard these names before because they are Tyler and Josh's favorite movies. Josh being Fight Club, Tyler being Donnie Darko. Fight Club is about a guy who makes up an entirely different persona to make himself feel better about his boring life. Now, this idea of kind of having a imaginary helpful force in your life is not something new to 21 Pilots. If you look at the music video My Blood, the character in that video had a friend that helped them the entire way that just wasn't real. You can also just read the Forest fic. This gets more interesting when we get to Donnie Darko. So the original footage I got of me talking about Donnie Darko, its audio got completely corrupted. Here I am a couple days later refilming it. Of course, when I film my super cool collab, this has to happen and I look like a dork. But at least you can see my cool Brittany Broski shirt. The People's Princess right there, ladies and gents.
Power! Power!
Yes, Tyler hasn't been exactly quiet about the fact that he enjoys Donnie Darko. For Halloween in 2020, he dressed up as Frank the Bunny. He made his Twitter profile Donnie for a while and even went as far to tweet, "I am Donnie Darko." I know what you're probably saying. Hey, just because you like a movie, alright, doesn't mean that you're gonna put it in your own narrative. And to that I say, loud and correct buzzer. Mark, their creative director, said on Reddit several years ago that they used the film for inspiration, and I think you can see that inspiration quite well when you compare Blurry Face's voice to Frank the Bunny's.
Yo, this song will never be on the radio. Even if my clique were to pick and the people were to vote, it's a few the proud and the emotional.
They are in great danger. Why are you wearing that stupid man suit?
Both sound very dark, pitched down, and, very spooky. But there's another comparison that we can make, and that concerns a door. Donnie's English teacher, played by Drew Barrymore, gets fired by her job, and while she is packing, Donnie can see something on the chalkboard.
What's going on?
I don't know. That's a good question. Suffice to say, I'm no longer your English teacher.
This is oddly similar to the blue door that 21 Pilots used during their Icy tour. Now sure, you could say that these are a stretch, but it's still interesting to see that both of their favorite films can be connected to the story that they're trying to tell. Just some little food for thought.
That is when the world will end.
The hero's archetype is nothing new. We see it hundreds and hundreds of times. If you just look at my favorite movie of all time, The Lion King, just another hero's journey. So we're not saying that we're trying to reinvent the wheel here by saying that 21 Pilots are using the hero's journey. We just thought it was a fun topic to kind of dive into. It's definitely fun to see how your inspirations and the things that you love always manage to find their way into whatever you're creating. I say this as an artist and as a musician. Yes, I draw too, baby. I am just a mashup of everybody that I have loved who came before me. You watch things, you see how they set their things up, and then you apply your favorite things to whatever you're creating. That's just how things work. Although, of course, you can't just straight up copy things, you have to make it your own. But still, even with 21 Pilots, you can see their DNA, you can see their favorites. And we just thought that was an interesting thing to discuss. So yes, if you liked the video, please hit like and subscribe. Please go check out and subscribe to TheBlondeClikkie. I want to thank her again for agreeing to collab with me. It was super fun. And as always, I will see you in the next one.